Imagine this. You're in a Zoom meeting with your VP and the senior leadership team. 12 people on the call. Your VP has just proposed a strategy that you know it's not going to work. You don't think it won't work. You know it won't work because you tried almost this exact approach at your last company and watch it fail in a big way. Your heart is racing. Your palms are sweating. Your cursor is hovering over the raise hand button. Everyone else is nodding along, unmuting to even say things like, I love it. Yeah, it sounds like great direction. And you can feel the pressure building in you. And the voice in your head is saying, say something. You could save everyone months of wasted effort. But another voice whispers, what if you're wrong? What if others think that you just don't get it? What if the VP thinks that you are not a team player? And so you stay quiet, the decision gets made, and 3 months later, exactly what you feared happens. The initiative fails, resources wasted, morale damaged. And you think, I knew this would happen. Why I didn't say something? That physical response you felt, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, the frozen voice, that's not weakness. That's just you being human and your nervous system responding to a perceived threat. And today, we are going to decode exactly what is happening in these moments. And not only that, but more importantly, what to do about it. Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe when we communicate better, we'll live better. My name is Lucy. I am strategic intervention and emotional intelligence coach. And usually I'm joined by Chris. Today, he might be away writing his awesome newsletter. So if you are not signed up for his newsletter on difficult conversations, how to have them better with more ease and more effectiveness, make sure that you go into the link below and sign up. Now back to today's topic. If you've ever felt that knot in your stomach before speaking up to someone more senior, or if you are the leader who suspects your team isn't telling you the whole truth, and therefore you don't have the full information to make the right and smart choice and decision, this episode is for you. Now, here is what you might not know about difficult conversations. The actual words you choose matter less than who is saying them and to whom. And you can have the perfect script, the perfect tone, the perfect evidence and data, and it can still land wrong if you haven't accounted for power dynamics. Power dynamics shape every difficult conversations we have, whether we acknowledge them or not. They determine who speaks, who stays silent, whose ideas get traction and buy-in, and whose get dismissed. And they literally trigger fight or flight, or even freeze or please responses in our nervous system. And in our current hybrid work world, these dynamics have gotten even trickier. We are navigating hierarchies through screens, missing 90% of body language cues often. People are not even on camera. And the mute button has become the new silence. And we can't even tell anymore if someone is choosing not to speak or if they're just on mute, or if their mic is not working. Today's episode, though, is not only for those virtual environments, also in-person environments. By the end of this episode, you will understand why these conversations feel so physically uncomfortable. You'll be able to identify and distinguish between 6 different types of power situations that are at play. And you'll have specific strategies for 3 different scenarios. 1, when you need to speak up to someone more senior. 2, when you are the leader trying to get honest input. And 3, when you're navigating conflict with a peer. Okay, so let's start with understanding what we are actually dealing with. You might be asking, so what exactly are power dynamics? At their simplest, they are the invisible forces that shape who speaks, who's heard, and whose ideas actually move forward in any conversation or relationship. You can think of them like gravity. You can see it, but it's constantly affecting how everything is moving. Power dynamics are the same. They're always there, always influencing the conversation, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. There's a paradox. Power dynamics exist, even when we pretend that they don't, or even when we really, really want them not to. Let me share what I hear from my clients. I'll have someone tell me, well, Lucy, I'm afraid to tell the truth to my leader, or I'm afraid to give that feedback. Even though they seem nice, even though they keep saying, I should be honest, there's still the person who decides if I get promoted or not. What if they take it personally, the thing that I tell them? What if they get upset at me and then it turns against me? I've had that happen with my past manager. I am really afraid to do that again. Then I will talk to a leader who says, I keep asking for feedback, but nobody gives me any critical input directly. Then I see my 360 feedback and I'm shocked. Why didn't anyone tell me this sooner when I asked? Or someone will tell me, frustrated, this person's suggestions get implemented immediately, but when I say something, my suggestions need like 3 layers of approval. I feel like nobody takes me seriously. All of these are power dynamics at work. Saying everyone's voice matters equally here, well, that doesn't eliminate the reality that some voices carry more weight. Ignoring these dynamics in the room, on your team, in your company, it doesn't make them go away. It just makes them harder to see and harder to navigate. Let me break down 6 different types of power that show up in workplace conversations. Now, most people think about the first one, but the other 5 are just as influential and sometimes even more. So the first one, this is the obvious one. It's called positional power. Is the formal hierarchy that comes with the title. For example, when your boss says, I need this by Friday, it is completely different than when your colleague says the same thing. Same sentence, totally different weight. Positional power is the easiest to see, which make it also easier to navigate, to work with. At least everyone knows it's there. Now, the second type of power is the expert power. This is about specialized knowledge, skills, or experience that others don't have. For example, the data scientist explaining machine learning has expert power in that moment, even if they are the most junior person in the room. Here is what's interesting. Expert power can actually override positional power in the right context. When cybersecurity specialist says, well, this is a critical vulnerability, even the CEO might listen. The third type of power is relational power. This is about networks, connections, and social capital. Who you know, who trusts you, who you have access to, whose ear you have. You've seen this person. They might not have the highest title, but they know everyone. They can grab coffee with the CFO or loop someone in from the executive team. That's relational power, and it transcends the formal hierarchy. Relational power is often invisible in the moment, but incredibly influential in outcomes. Decisions get made in the conversations before and after the official meeting, and relational power determines who's in those conversations. Now this could be a blind spot for many, where I hear from some clients, Lucy, I really want to get that promotion. But my colleague, who is friends with the manager, I think they're going to get that promotion instead of me, even though I work harder and the colleague just goes and socializes more. I think this is unfair. I've had similar conversations to these. What's missing? That's the relational power. And in our future episodes, we'll definitely have some guests share about how to create that type of relational power, how to network, which for a lot of people, it can feel like a really bad word. But about that in some other episode. The next type of power is the resource power. It's the control over budgets, headcounts, tools, opportunities, even information. If you control someone else's needs, you have power in that conversation. The product manager who controls the roadmap has resource power over engineers who want their projects prioritized. The hiring manager has resource power over candidates. The person who controls the meeting agenda has resource power over what gets discussed. The fifth type of power is informational power. It is access to informations others don't have. Ever been in a meeting where someone says, well, based on the conversation I had with leadership yesterday, and suddenly everyone leans in? That's informational power. In organizations, information is currency. The executive assistant often has more informational power than VPs because they see everything flowing through. Now, here is the tricky part. Informational power can be used to exclude or include people. I can share that yet is a power move, whether it's intentional or not. The sixth type of power is cultural or identity power. This is the most uncomfortable one to talk about, but maybe the most important. Now, we've had some other episodes even talking about specifically this situation, about race, for example. Our systems, consciously or unconsciously, privilege certain identities, communication styles, backgrounds, and ways of being over others. Some specific examples say direct, assertive communication styles are typically rewarded in the US workplaces, which can disadvantage people from other cultures. Let's say cultures that value indirect communication or consensus building. That's cultural power at work. Another example, certain type of an accent, an English accent, are perceived as more credible. Some are perceived as less credible in certain situations. Certain leadership styles may be seen more as natural, or certain people have to prove their competence while others have it assumed. The reason this matters in difficult conversations is that two people can say the exact same thing and have it land completely differently based on their identity. That's cultural power shaping the conversation. Now, before we talk about the specific ways power dynamics make conversations difficult, I want to explain what's happening in your brain and body during these moments. Because once you understand that, you'll stop beating yourself up for feeling anxious. This isn't a character flaw, it's just your nervous system and biology in play. When you are in a difficult conversation with someone who has more power than you, your brain literally perceives it as a threat to your survival. Here's what's happening. Your amygdala, the ancient almond-shaped part of your brain responsible for threat detection, cannot tell the difference between my boss is disappointed with my work and there is a predator trying to eat me. Both register as threats to our well-being. So your body launches the same threat response it would if you were facing physical danger. So for example, your heart rate spikes, your palms get sweaty, your breathing becomes shallow, your blood shifts away from your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, the reasoning, problem solving part of your brain, the smartest part of your brain, and redirects to your limbs, preparing you for the fight or flight. Now, what also happens? Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. This is why, in the moment of a difficult conversation, you can't think clearly. You forget your carefully prepared points. Your mind goes blank. Your brain has literally diverted resources away from complex thinking and toward just survival. But here is what makes power dynamics especially triggering. Your brain has evolved to be very sensitive to social hierarchy and social threats. Neuroscience research shows that social pain, like rejection, exclusion, humiliation, or status threat, activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. When you get socially rejected, your brain lights up in the same areas as when you stub your toe. Ouch. Your brain treats the threat of being fired, demoted, or losing status the same way it treats physical pain. And here is one critical piece. When someone has power over you, they have the ability to inflict social pain. They can damage your reputation, limit your opportunities, exclude you from important decisions, threaten your livelihood. Your amygdala knows this. So even if the conversation is objectively low stakes, just a quick chat about the project timeline, your body can react as if your survival is at stake. It's because in our evolutionary history, being cast out of the tribe, losing status, or angering the tribal leader literally meant death. You'd be left alone without protection or resources. We are not in the jungle anymore dealing with predators on a daily basis who could kill us, but our nervous systems are still reacting. as if. So what does it look like in a workplace difficult conversation? Well, there are actually 4 possible responses how our nervous system can respond. The first one is flight. You avoid the conversation entirely. You stay quiet in the meetings, you don't challenge decisions even when you should. You find reasons to postpone. Your nervous system is saying, get away from this threat, run. The next one is flight. You get defensive, argumentative, or aggressive. You interrupt. You double down on your position. Your voice gets louder and sharper. Your nervous system is saying, attack the threat before it attacks you. This often gets labeled as not being a team player or having an attitude problem. The next one is freeze. You go blank. You can't find words. Your mind feels foggy. Later, you replay the conversation thinking, my God, why didn't I say anything? It's because your prefrontal cortex literally went offline. Your nervous system decided the safest response was basically to be invisible, to hide, not to draw attention. The 4 main reaction of our nervous system to perceived threat in the difficult conversation is one that you usually don't hear about much, but it's very common in organizations. It's a fawn or please response. This is a sneaky one that often goes unrecognized. Your manager asks you to take on another project and work late tonight, even though you promised your partner you'd be home for family dinner. And you hear yourself saying, yes, of course, I'll help. Let me just text my family that I'll be late. Well, you wanted to say no. You knew you should say no, but your nervous system overrode you, prioritizing the relationship with the person in power over your own needs and boundaries and your family's needs. This response often gets rewarded in the workplace. You are seen as a team player, flexible, someone who goes above and beyond, even though it's actually a stress response that leads to burnout and resentment or even future passive-aggressive behavior. None of these responses are character flaws. They are not evidence that you're weak or difficult or incompetent or pushover. They are your nervous system doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. Protect you from perceived threats. So now you know what's happening in your body and why. This biological response creates 4 specific patterns that make power dynamics so challenging to navigate. So the first pattern is the silence factor. Now, people with less power self-censor constantly. I don't mean they occasionally hold back. I mean, they are running a split-second risk-benefit calculation on almost every potential contribution. The internal dialogue sounds like, is this worth saying? Will this make me look stupid? Will this hurt my reputation? Is this going to come back to bite me in my performance review? Does everyone else see this, or is it just me? This is the flight response in action. I have multiple clients tell me some version of this. Lucy, I feel so uncomfortable speaking in group meetings. I know I need to increase my visibility. I often have ideas that could save the company money or make things more efficient. But when the big boss is in the room, I just freeze. My mind goes blank. I can't get the words out. I just sweat and I just have all these thoughts running in my head and I just don't say anything. That's the freeze response in action. And in most workplaces, the stakes are deadlines, budgets, efficiency. Uncomfortable, usually not catastrophic. But now imagine this. You're a nurse. You see a doctor about to administer the wrong medication to a patient. You know it's wrong, but the doctor has more authority, more status, more power. Your nervous system says freeze, and you stay silent. The patient could die. This isn't hypothetical. The book Willful Blindness by Margaret Heffernan documents case after case where employees knew something was dangerously wrong in healthcare, aviation, in finance, but their threat response kept them silent. And people died. Companies collapsed. Anyone remembers Enron, for example, or Wells Fargo creating fake accounts? Something like that. Now, most of us aren't in life or death situations, luckily. But all of you who are leaders, and this applies to parents too, because these power dynamics transfer directly into our personal relationships, Think about this. How much critical data are you missing right now because people's nervous systems are telling them, don't speak up to authority, stay quiet? Do you wonder how many problems are getting swept under the rug, growing bigger and possibly more expensive because people freeze in your presence? And you might not even know what you don't know. That's the silence factor. Now, the next one is the interpretation gap. What that means. Now, the exact same words land differently depending on who says that. It's not about people being unfair. It's about the weight of implications that come with different positions. For example, when a CEO says, I am concerned about this timeline, people scramble. Projects get reprioritized, people work weekends, everything shifts. But when an intern says, I am concerned about this timeline, people nod politely and maybe send them a calendar invite. Or when a senior leader says, I disagree with this approach, it's called providing strategic direction. When a junior person says, I disagree with this approach, it can be perceived as not being a team player or not getting the big picture. The same words, totally different gravitational pull. The person with more power doesn't even have to raise the voice. The power does the work for them. So far we covered the silence factor, the interpretation gap. The third factor is the risk asymmetry. That means speaking up in a difficult conversations has radically different costs depending on where you sit in the power structure. It's not just about perception, it's actually a real risk. For example, a junior person speaking truth to power might be risking their career trajectory, their reputation, their next promotion, their relationships with key stakeholders, maybe even their job. What's a senior leader risking when they have a difficult conversations with somebody junior? Well, being slightly uncomfortable for a moment, maybe having an awkward exchange. The stakes are fundamentally unequal. Some may say, this isn't fair. This is not right, but it's real. And pretending this asymmetry doesn't exist doesn't help anyone. It just makes the people with less power feel gaslit when they're told, well, everyone can speak freely here, so I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so let's recap. We talked about the silence factor. We talked about the interpretation gap, the risk asymmetry. Now let's talk about the power that's invisible to those who have it. If you're a leader, you might not realize how much your presence, your words, your body language affects others. We'll come back to this in detail when we talk about strategies for leaders, but the key insight is this. If you have positional power, you cannot trust your gut about whether people feel safe disagreeing with you. Your gut is likely wrong. So now you understand what you're dealing with. Power dynamics are real. They're multi-layered. They trigger your nervous systems and they create silence, interpretation gaps, risk asymmetry, and blind spots. Okay, you can say now, well, Lucy, this is really nice, but what do I do with this information? I hear you. And this is what we're going to address next. We're going to talk about the 3 different scenarios: managing up, managing down conversations, and talking peer-to-peer. Let's start with the scenario that most people find the hardest, managing up. It's when you have less formal power. For example, you are individual contributor or maybe a new manager and you need to have a difficult conversation with someone more senior. Maybe you need to push back on a decision or deliver bad news or raise a concern. Here are 4 moves that are available for you in this situation. Now, the first one, and a lot of clients already heard this from me, yes and strategy. The biggest mistakes people make when speaking up to power is just blurting out their concern, saying, for example, I think this is a bad idea, or this is not going to work. We shouldn't do this. It lands like a brick. Even if you're right, it feels like the opposition rather than contribution. And remember, the person with power might have their own threat response activated, so they can get defensive. Instead, you need to frame your concern in a way that gives you permission to raise it. you are not asking for permission. You're probably not asking for permission explicitly, but you are creating the psychological framing, the psychological safety that makes whatever you say feel collaborative rather than confrontational. You're helping their nervous system stay regulated and calm while you deliver the difficult information so they can actually hear you rather than go right into the defensive mode. Before I go into examples, the generic principle for the yes and strategy is you acknowledge, you listen for in whatever the other person is saying or doing for at least 10% that you can validate and acknowledge. And then you add your part. For example, I love where this is headed and I want to flag one implementation risk. By doing this, you're adding, not opposing to what they're doing or saying. Another example, I'm excited about this and I want to make sure we've considered this other aspect. Now, by doing that, you're actually helping them be thorough. One last example around yes and. I am so excited about this new project and can I share a pattern I'm seeing from customers' perspective? Now, by doing that, you're bringing information they might not have and adding another perspective. Notice that last one, the and, not the but. This is subtle but powerful. The but signals opposition and can often trigger defensiveness. The and signals addition. You are on the same team, building together. Notice in your conversations, are you using yeah, but versus when you try yes, and notice the difference. Let's talk about the move number 2. Use questions as power equalizers. Questions are one of the most underrated tools in difficult conversations with power asymmetry. A well-crafted question invites the other person into collaborative problem solving. It can transform the dynamic from you versus me, you versus us, to us versus the problem. Here are some questions that can level that playing field a little bit more. For example, what would success look like 6 months from now? It gets people to think about outcomes rather than just positions. Another question, what would need to be true for this to work? That question can uncover assumptions and potential barriers together. I'll give you one more example. Help me understand how this fits with this previous priority we talked about. Now, from this perspective, you're genuinely trying to understand, not passive aggressively challenge their move. Now, these questions do something great. They assume good intent, they demonstrate your thinking about their goals and the broader context, and they transform the dynamic from junior person questioning senior person to two intelligent people solving a complex problem together. Now, one warning though, do not use questions to mask statements or accusations. For example, well, don't you think this is a terrible idea? That's not a true question. It's an accusation wrapped in a question marks, and people can smell it a mile away. It will trigger their defensive response, not a collaboration. So please ask real questions that you genuinely want answered. I know it is sometimes hard, yet even asking questions is a skill that can be developed by anyone. Okay, so in the situation when you have less power than the other person, you have another move available to you, which is to find allies and build pattern evidence. Okay, so what do I mean by that? The reality is that one person's concern can be dismissed as an outlier or a misunderstanding or someone who just doesn't get it or someone having a bad day or having a bad mood. And so they're not appreciative of the idea. But 3 people seeing the same thing, raising the same concern, not being excited about it, that's data. That's a trend. That's signal, not noise. That's much harder to dismiss. Before raising a concern, especially a difficult concern with someone senior, talk to peers, talk to colleagues or others who might be seeing the same issue, not in a gossipy, complaining way, but in more of a reality checking, problem solving way. So you can try, hey, I'm thinking about raising this concern with our leader, but have you noticed this too? Am I seeing this clearly or am I missing something? What's your experience been? If multiple people validate the concern, you can say in the actual conversation, I've been talking with several people on the team And we're all seeing specific things. Here are examples from different contexts. Now, some may disregard it as, this is politics. This is going somebody's back. No, it's not. This is actually responsible escalation and due diligence. You're doing your research, checking the validity of your data, of your concerns. You are bringing validated concerns backed by multiple perspectives and data points, not just a personal opinion or individual grievance. There is one other move available to you if you're in a lower power position, and that's to choose your battles strategically. When you have less power, you have limited political capital. Every time you push back or raise concern, you're spending some of that money, the political power, the power money. You need to be strategic about when you spend it. Now, this isn't about being timid. It's about really being effective and strategic. So before you decide whether to have a difficult conversation with someone more senior, you can ask yourself, is this consequential? Will staying silent create real harm to people, the project, or the organization? You can also ask, do I have standing? Am I close enough to the issue to have credibility and relevant information? Is the timing right? Is this person open to input right now, or are they in pure execution mode where they just even cannot hear it, or they're so upset right now and triggered that their nervous system is not going to allow that information to go through? Can I actually influence this, or is this decision already locked in? You can also ask, what's the realistic cost benefit? Is this worth the relational and political money it will cost me? Now, one other tip about managing your own nervous system before and during the difficult conversation. So we'll spend a few minutes here about managing that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response we talked about previously, so that you can respond from your smartest part of the brain rather than from the part of the brain that can sabotage your conversation. So before the conversation, I'm going to share 3 strategies what you can do. Strategy number 1, do a body scan. Are you hungry, tired, dehydrated? Pause and check in with yourself before you have that conversation. Because if you're hungry, you can get hangry, and chances are it's not going to be helpful for the conversation. All of these make your threat response more sensitive in a way. So take care of your basic needs first. Strategy number 2, practice slow breathing. Specifically, make your exhale longer than you inhale. Try it even now. Take a moment, assess yourself on a level 1 to 5, how calm you are right now. 5, the calmest, 1, not calm at all. I want to run. I want to do something else. Okay. And let's take 3 deep breaths together. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. Exhale through your mouth and exhale very slowly. Now take another deep breath in and let go again very slowly through your mouth. Take another deep breath in and let go very slowly out of your mouth. Now you can assess yourself. 1 to 5. Are you noticing any shift on how calm, relaxed you're feeling right now? If not, maybe try by yourself, a few other deep breaths. Sometimes when you are so stressed, so hijacked, it takes multiple breaths, not just 3, to really feel the shift. Okay, so let's go to one other strategy before the conversation. You reframe the activation. So instead of saying, oh my God, I'm so anxious, and I'm anxious because I'm weak, I don't have enough mental fitness yet. What about you try the 3 breaths or more? Practice slower exhale, remember. And then you try saying to yourself and interpreting that sensations that you have in your body. Well, my body is energized because this really is important to me, that conversation. And you choose to channel that energy into clarity and focus. Research shows that reframing anxiety as excitement, so how we decide to interpret the physical sensations versus anxiety to excitement, I really care, actually improves performance. Okay, now, so these are 3 strategies before conversation. Body scan, slow breathing, reframing the anxiety to excitement, or I really care. Now, there are steps also you can do during that difficult conversation. If you feel yourself freezing and going blank, pause and take one deep breath. It's okay to say, let me think about that for a second. Now plant your feet for me. Strategy number 2, on the ground. Feel the physical stability or feel the chair underneath you. That can ground your nervous system and keep your prefrontal cortex online, that smartest part that you need. Now, if you notice fight, response, kicking, or flight, or other one, please, or freeze, that's your cue when you're getting. So if you notice the fight, flight, freeze, response kicking in, you notice you are getting defensive or argumentative, that's your cue to slow down and ask a question rather than making a statement. Okay. Now, let's flip it completely. If you're a manager or leader, your challenge in difficult conversations is completely different. You need to actively counterbalance your own power so that the truth can actually emerge. Because remember, your team's nervous systems are responding to you as a potential threat. Here are 4 moves for you. Move number 1. Explicitly share your power in the moment. Imagine your job as a leader isn't to win the conversation or to be right. If you believe so, that might be your nervous system trying to protect you. But that's for another conversation. Your job as a leader is to make it safe for people to tell you things, even those things that you don't want to hear. Why? Because that is the only way that you can prevent making decisions based on incomplete information that lead to disastrous outcomes. For example, we talked about those companies before I've mentioned. That could be even deadly. Let's say if you're your doctor and you need the nurse to have your back and the patient's back. So you need to explicitly share the power in the moment because your positional power is always there. Even when you don't feel it, even when you think you're just being casual, you have to say it out loud. Your team won't believe it unless you verbalize it clearly. People need to hear it. Your team won't believe you unless you verbalize it clearly and repeatedly and also follow through with your behavior and action that's congruent with what you say. For example, the things you can say could be, I know my title might make it harder to push back on my position, but please do it anyway. I'm not attached to being right. I'm attached to us making the best possible decision. Or another way of saying this. You know what? I'm going to be quiet for the next few minutes and just listen. I want to understand what you're all seeing and experiencing before I share even my perspective. Okay. Now, you might think that my team knows I'm open to feedback. Well, chances are they don't. They've been possibly conditioned by previous bosses, by organizational culture, by every power dynamics they've navigated, perhaps even from their own family when they never had a voice or were punished when they raised a concern or disagreed. So these habits could form for years. And it could be difficult to break, but you as a leader need to remember that and not to take it personally when somebody is slow to change and slow to open up. Keep in mind, you represent the power that triggers their nervous system. For some people, it's easier to speak up. For a lot of people, it may be very difficult. And their survival patterns of not speaking up, it could be very ingrained. But these people can hold key perspectives that can support your project, your company, and create the success. Okay. In the situation when you have more power than somebody else, there is another move available for you. Reward productive conflict publicly. What gets rewarded gets repeated, and what gets punished gets hidden. If someone challenges you constructively and you get defensive or dismissive, or you just move on quickly without engaging, you've just taught everybody watching your conversation never to disagree with you again. You've activated their threat response. When someone pushes back on you or challenges your thinking, name it positively in the moment. For example, you know what? I'm really glad you pushed back on that assumption because, that's exactly the kind of thinking we need on this team. Well, that requires also some you being calm in your nervous system. Okay, so the things you can say, for example, I'm happy you pushed back on that assumption because this is exactly the type of thinking we need on this team. I want all the perspectives to be heard here. Or you can say, oh, that's a perspective I haven't considered. And actually, it's making me rethink my approach. Tell me more about that. Or you can say, you know what? You are right. I was wrong. I really appreciate you sharing that and catching that and having the courage to say it here. Okay, in that situation, in the meeting, in the group meeting, you're not just responding to one person. You're teaching everyone else as a leader in the room or in the Zoom call or Teams call or whatever platform you use, that it's psychologically safe to disagree, that it's safe to disagree with you. You are setting a team norm through public reinforcement. You're making it safer for everybody. You're building a new culture where true feedback can be exchanged in a safe environment where people can give and receive feedback, because it also teaches your employees how to receive feedback. Now, I've mentioned it a little bit before, but here's the critical part. You actually have to change your mind sometimes based on what people tell you. So it's not just about the things you say, but it's also the things that you do after. Because if people see that disagreeing with you is performative, you praise how awesome, it's that they're sharing their disagreements, but you still do your thing without implementing any change, they will think that you just listen politely, and they will basically stop wasting their breath and energy. They will stop trusting you that you're genuine. So let people see you update your thinking, your actions. And when you've changed your approach based on team input, it builds massive trust that the conversation actually matters. Okay. So now we talked about 2 moves available when you have more power than the other one, how to make sure that they will tell you the truth. Move number 1, share the power explicitly. Move number 2, reward productive conflict publicly and follow through. Okay, move number 3 connects to the follow through. And that's to check your receiving signals. Because your words might say, I'm open to feedback. I want to hear dissenting opinions, but your body language, your facial expressions, or your behavior tell the real story. And people believe behavior, not words. They hear the tone of the voice, not just the words. And so their nervous systems are reading your nonverbals. So you genuinely need to feel it or be an excellent actor, but then still follow through in order to do that. So here are some questions to ask yourself, or better yet, ask a trusted colleague to observe you in meetings and answer honestly. When someone disagrees with me, what does my body do? Do I lean in with curiosity or do I pull back? Do my arms cross defensively, or does my jaw get tight? Do I have this disagreement on my face? So what's my facial expression doing? Am I genuinely curious and open? Or am I annoyed, judging them, and I'm trying to hide it? When someone gives me critical feedback, do I ask a follow-up question? Or do I quickly defend, justify, or just, okay, let's talk about something else. Do I actually change my approach based on feedback? Or do people experience their input as disappearing into a black hole? When was the last time someone on my team changed my mind about something important? Well, if you can't remember, that might be a red flag. Okay, here is an uncomfortable exercise possibly for you. It can be illuminating and eye-opening. Watch the recording of your past meeting with the sound off. Just watch your body language, your facial expressions. What would someone learn about whether it's safe to disagree with you just from watching yourself and your nonverbals? A lot of leaders are shocked by what they see. The gap. By the way, I myself don't like watching myself, even in my own coaching conversations or on this podcast. So it's totally normal when you feel a little bit weird watching yourself. Yeah, don't let that discomfort prevent you from learning, because the gap between how we think, how we are showing up, and how we are actually showing up can be big. Your crossed arms, your quick head shake, your tight smile. Your team sees all of it, and their nervous systems are reading it as threat. Now let's talk about the one more move that is available to you if you really want to know the truth from your team and you have more position, more power than them. It's to create structural safety, not just cultural safety. Cultural safety is saying, we value dissent, But the structural safety is building systems that actually protect people when they disagree, dissent. You need both. For example, you could put in place anonymous feedback mechanisms that you actually read and respond to publicly. Or you can try rotating who runs meetings, so it's not always the highest ranking person controlling the floor. You can also explicitly invite the quietest people to speak. For example, Sarah, you've been quiet. I'd love to hear your take. These are some structural interventions that redistribute the power in the conversation. They work even when individual people would otherwise keep quiet. Okay, we have our final scenario. Let's talk about navigating difficult conversations with peers or colleagues at the same level. These can actually be the trickiest because there is no formal hierarchy, but there is still power at play. Maybe they have more expert power, or more relational power, or more tenure. Three moves available for you. Move number 1, name the awkward. Move number 2, trade power explicitly. Move number 3, established shared metrics for success. Okay, let's start with move number 1. Name the awkward. Naming the elephant in the room actually makes it smaller. When you acknowledge the awkwardness, you release some pressure. Everyone can just stop pretending. You can try opening with, well, this might be awkward since we are at the same level, but I need to give you some feedback about how our last collaboration went. Or you can say, I know we are peers and this might feel weird. And at the same time, I want to talk about the impact of this situation on the project. Okay, what this does, it acknowledges the shared discomfort instead of pretending it doesn't exist. And paradoxically, acknowledging discomfort usually makes everyone less defensive. Everybody's nervous system relaxes. You're not attacking, you're just navigating something awkward together. Okay, once you do that, you have move number 2 available. Trade power explicitly. Most peer conflicts happen because people are implicitly competing over the same power. My way is better, or no, my way is better. Instead, make power explicit and complementary rather than competitive. For example, I know you have more expertise in X and I have more expertise in Y. How about we use both? What about if you lead on X decisions and I lead on Y decisions? Or you can say, you know what, you're closer to the customer on this, so I'm gonna defer to your read on user needs. On the technical side, I'm more familiar with our constraints, so let me add deadlines. Now, if you cannot agree on anything, there's still one option left for you. You can say, it seems we cannot clearly see this differently. Okay. It seems that we just see this differently. What if we each make our case and then bring in the third party to help us decide, this third person? The last move I want to mention is to establish shared metrics for success. A lot of peer conflict happens because people are optimizing for different things. You care about speed. They care about quality. You care about innovation. They care about stability. You are not disagreeing about means, you're disagreeing about ends. So before diving into a difficult conversation about how to do something, get aligned on what success looks like. Okay, you can say, okay, let's step back. What are we actually trying to achieve here? Or you can say, what would make this win for both of us? Or you can say, how will we know if we've succeeded? How about we identify what we're really measuring here? I want both of us to partner together to make it a success. Okay, once you've aligned on that goal and both of you have the same goal, the conversation about tactics becomes way easier. You're no longer fighting about whose approach is better. You're collaborating on the best way to reach that shared goal, a shared vision. We talked about strategies or your moves that you can take in the different positions, if you're managing up, if you're managing down, if you're managing across. Before we wrap for today, I wanted to share 4 key principles that are applicable for any conversation, regardless of who has power in that conversation. Number 1, impact. Make impact more important than intent. Number 2, look deeper. look for the interests under the positions. Number 3, build relationship capital. Number 3, sometimes you need to do organizational judo. So what do they mean? Impact. We may assume ill intent, and when we do that, the conversation is never going to go well. When you say, you are trying to undermine me, or you don't care about quality, or you're just playing politics here. So even if you're right, the other person will get immediately defensive. Very high chances of that. And they can say, that's not what I meant, or you are misinterpreting my intentions. And suddenly the conversation is about their intentions instead of the actual problem. Focus on observable impact instead. Describe what happened and what effect it had, what impact it had, without making claims about why they did it. For example, when the deadline got moved up without discussion with the team, the impact was that we had to work through the weekend and still couldn't deliver quality work. Next time, would you please have a discussion with us first so we can all align and deliver better work on time? Another example. When I wasn't included in that client meeting, the impact was that I didn't have the context for the follow-up work I was asked to do. Okay. Now, in those situations, you're not saying they're a bad person. You're not saying they did it on purpose. You are just describing what happened and the result. Much harder to argue with, and it makes it safer for the nervous system of the other person to receive the feedback and actually hear you without getting triggered. Now, the second principle I mentioned, go deeper and separate position from interest. Go deeper and to look into why they want what they want. In any difficult conversation shaped by power dynamics, people almost always defend their position without revealing their underlying interest. So the position is the what they want. The interest is the why they're trying, what they're trying to actually achieve. So here's the key. For example, the VP doesn't actually want their specific strategy. That's just the position. What they want is successful Q3 results or board approval or market share growth. That's the interest, that's their why underneath the position. So if you can identify and align on the interest or aspiration, you can have a completely different conversation. Okay. Now, the principle number 3, you build relationship capital before you need it. It's difficult to have effective communication with someone you have no relationship with. You can't withdraw from a bank account where you've never made deposits, right? So the manager who never checks in, never asks how you're doing, never shows genuine interest in your work or perspective, they can suddenly show up with hard feedback and expect it to land well. They simply haven't earned the right to that conversation yet. They don't have enough trust for the conversation to be received well, or for the feedback to be received well. Similarly, the individual contributor who only talks to their manager when they need something, who never shares wins or never offers help, they are going to have a much harder time when they need to push back on decision or when they want to get a buy-in into something. Now, how do you build this capital, the relationship capital? Regular check-ins when things are fine, not just when there's a problem. Have really genuine curiosity about people's work, perspectives, and experience. Acknowledge good work and contributions. Don't only focus on what's wrong. It's part of our survival brain. And remember, our survival brain does not make the best decisions. Follow through on your commitments. Show up consistently, not just in the crisis moments. When you have this relationship capital and you have some balance, positive balance of trust in the trust bank with your employees, with peers, with others, with your manager, difficult conversations can be still hard, but are more manageable. Because you've built enough trust, people give you benefit of the doubt. Without that capital, every difficult conversation is starting from zero or even worse, from negative. So build the relationship before you need it. And the last principle about the organizational judo, sometimes you cannot change the power dynamics, or not immediately at least. And the other person has more power. They're going to keep that power, and no amount of skillful conversation technique is going to change that basic reality. When you can't change the dynamic, Work with it instead of fighting it, just like in martial arts, fighting it directly. Redirect the force instead of opposing it directly. Enlist the power rather than trying to neutralize it. Work with it. What could it look like? It could be framing your concerns in terms of helping them achieve their goals. For example, I want to help you get the outcome you're looking for. Here's what I'm seeing that might get in the way. Or you can say, I know that you need this. This is the goal that you have. And I'm worried about this X thing that might affect that. What would you suggest we do about this? Now you're positioning yourself as aligned with their goals, seeking their expertise, making them part of the solution. Now, some may feel that this is manipulation. It's not. It's looking at strategic alignment. You're finding a way forward that works within the reality of the power structure rather than pretending that structure doesn't exist and then hitting your head against the wall and getting hurt. We are at the final part of our episode. So let's bring it all together. We've covered a lot. So here is what you need to remember. Number one, we talked about what power dynamics actually are, those invisible forces that shape who speaks, who's heard, and whose ideas move forward. We talked about the 6 types of power: positional, expert, relational, resource, informational, and cultural power. We also touched a little bit on the neuroscience, why your amygdala can tell the difference between social threat and physical threat. So it triggers fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And remember, this isn't your weakness. It's just human biology and our nervous system responses. We also looked at why these power dynamics are difficult to deal with. We discussed the silence factor. When people with less power self-censor constantly, and leaders often have no idea what they're missing. We talked about the interpretation gap. When same words have different weight depending on who says them. We talked also about the risk asymmetry. Speaking up costs different people. When speaking up costs different people different amounts. And also we talked about the invisibility problem. That power is often invisible to those who have it. Okay, then we got tactical. If you have less power, build your permission structure, use questions strategically, create coalitions, choose your battles, and manage your nervous system. If you have more power, explicitly share your power, reward productive conflict publicly, check how you're receiving signals, and create structural safety. And with fear, we talked about naming the awkwardness, trading power explicitly, and establishing shared metrics for success. And 4 universal principles, this is what we finished with. Focus on impact, not intent. Go deeper and separate position from interest. Build relationship capital before you need it. And sometimes use organizational judo. That's a lot. But here's the thing. You don't need to use all of these. You just need to use the right one at the right time. If you take away nothing else from this episode, remember this. The goal is not to eliminate power dynamics. That can be impossible or very hard to do. The goal is to see power dynamics and use different moves to support honest conversations. Power will always exist in organizations. Hierarchy exists for a reason. And different people will always have different types of influence. That is not the problem. The problem is when power dynamics operate invisibly, when they create silence, when they prevent the truth from reaching the people who need to hear it, when they activate threat responses that shut down our ability to think and communicate clearly. When you name those power dynamics, there's the rule, name it to tame it. When you understand them, when you work with them strategically instead of pretending they don't exist, that's when you can have the difficult conversations that actually matter. And that's when you can create some real change. And now here's your micro experiment for this week. Something small you can actually do. In your next difficult conversation, try naming the power dynamic out loud, just once, and see what happens. If you're speaking to someone more senior, I know you're the VP and I'm bringing you a concern. I want to be thoughtful about how I frame it. Or if you're a leader, I know my title might make this feel risky to say, but I really want your honest perspective. Or if you're talking to a peer, well, this is awkward since we are at the same level. And at the same time, I want to share this. Just name it. Make it the invisible visible. And you might be surprised at how much it changes the dynamic. And speaking of taking action, if you want to go deeper on difficult conversations, my colleague Chris has an excellent newsletter and is launching a course on this very topic. I'll link to his work in the show notes and the way to reach him. Now, here's one thing. You can learn all the strategies in the world, but if you don't understand what's sabotaging your own resilience and communication patterns, you'll keep hitting the same wall. You'll keep hitting the same walls and wondering why you have a headache. So here is what I want you to do. Go to mindfittery.com/be-free and take the assessment. It will show you exactly what's getting in your way, what part of your survival brain is most active, and how it sabotages you. It takes just about 10 minutes, the assessment, and you will get more clarity on what's holding you back and how to get unstuck. And if you are a leader, L&D professional, or HR leader who wants to bring this kind of transformation to your entire team, reach out to me directly. I fill out the contact form on my website, mindfittery.com. And let's talk about creating a culture where difficult conversations actually work and we communicate in our workplace. All the links are in the show notes. Okay, before we fully close today, I want to leave you with one final thought. If you're still listening, I want you to know that the difficult conversations you're avoiding right now, they're probably the ones you need to have the most. That knot in your stomach, that voice in your head saying, I shouldn't say anything. That's the nervous system activation. That's often a sign that something important is at stake. The power dynamics make these conversations harder, no question about that. But they don't make them impossible. You can speak up. You can push back. You can deliver the hard feedback. You can advocate for yourself and your team. You just need to be strategic about how you do it. And remember, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite the fear. People who navigate power dynamics aren't fearless. They're just strategic and intentional about when and how they engage. Thank you for listening to the art and science of difficult conversations today. If this episode was helpful, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who's navigating a tough conversation right now or who is in a power struggle dynamic. Until next time, be brave, be strategic, and remember that the best conversations are often the hardest ones. See you next time.